50. 50 of the Galactic Council's most powerful telepaths were sent in to break the prisoner. 50 were carried out, shattered. Mindless. Broken husks whispering of only one thing, the abyss they had found inside his mind. This was the problem with Asset 734. The alien warlord who had not spoken or moved in 10 years. He was a living statue, and his silence was breaking the galaxy's greatest minds. The Council's interrogators, their chemicals, their most advanced logic, had all failed. So as a final, desperate, illogical act, they were sending in an obsolete tool, not a soldier, not a telepath. They were sending in a disgraced human historian, Dr. Archivist Deckard. His mission was not to interrogate the prisoner, but to read him his species obituary. They believed his human sentimentality was a flaw. They were about to find out. It was the only key. Before we move further into the story, I want to thank you for being here. Our community is what brings these worlds to life. If you want to support this channel and help us reach a larger audience, please take a moment to hit that like button. Share this story and subscribe if you haven't already. We're on a mission to explore the heart of humanity, and every single subscription helps. Also, I'd love to know, what part of the world are you watching this story from? Let me know in the comments below. And feel free to suggest what kind of stories you'd like to see next. Your ideas truly shape this channel. Now, let's continue. The medical dreadnought Ethelberg was not a place of healing. It was a place of cold, sterile government rules. It floated in the black, far from any major trade route. A white-paneled coffin for the galaxy's most dangerous minds. Patients were assets. Empathy was a waste of time. And its newest arrival, Dr. Archivist Deckard, was the biggest waste of time of all, a human historian. Deckard was a man who had been demoted as far as a person could go. His name, Archivist Deckard, had once been spoken with respect at the Galactic University. He was a top expert on alien history, but he had made a big mistake in the eyes of the Logical Council. He was too focused on feelings. He argued that a species' real history was not in its battle records, but in its poetry, in its songs, in the names it gave its children. For this human flaw, he was disgraced. He was reassigned to the Archive of Dead Species, a dusty digital graveyard. He spent his days writing obituaries for civilizations that no one remembered. He was, in effect, a man left behind, tasked with studying other things left behind. He was called from his dusty office to the clean white office of Administrator Musburger. Musburger was a Xylopian, a species with smooth, porcelain-like skin and a completely blank face. He looked at Deckard not as a person, but as a tool. A very simple, very primitive tool. Dr. Deckard, Musburger's voice was like static. Your unique skills have been requested. You will be assigned to Asset 734, General Dutch. General Dutch? Deckard replied, his voice quiet. He knew the name. Everyone did. The Boar of Vorlag, the most terrifying military mind of the century. The man who had 10 years ago simply aren't stopped. The asset is broken. Musburger continued, tapping on a data slate. The screen showed a massive 7-foot-tall figure chained to a chair in a padded cell. It is a broken piece of equipment. The Council has decided that before disposal, its history must be archived. The history of its species, the Vorlag. Musburger's unblinking eyes finally met Deckard's. The previous specialists had problems. 50 of them. He gestured to a wall. The asset's mind is a mental danger zone. It is unwell. The telepaths who tried to enter it were broken. Deckard's stomach tightened. He wasn't a telepath. He was just a man. Administrator, what am I supposed to do? I'm a historian, not a mind healer. You are a comfort archivist, doctor. That is your new title. Your task is not to fix the asset. Your task is to sit in the room with it and talk. You will read the history of the Vorlag at the asset. You will record the complete history of its species, as a final formality before its disposal. Deckard felt a cold chill. This wasn't an act of kindness. This was a special, cold kind of cruelty. They were forcing him to read the obituary of a dead species, to its last living survivor. The asset is unmoving, Musburger said, standing up, the conversation clearly over. It will not notice you. You are simply there to complete the file. The guards will escort you. Do not cross the 5-meter kill zone marked on the floor. The asset is still strong. Do not stray from the approved history texts. You begin to... Now, Deckard was handed a data slate. On it was the official history of the Vorlag, a list of wars, of conquests, a history without a soul. He was led through silent white hallways. The guards, tall, insect-like beings with 4 arms, clacked on the floor, their weapons drawn. They stopped at a heavy door marked 734. Good luck. Human, one of them hissed, its mandibles clicking. The last one, the telepath. He started screaming about the mountain of skulls, and he never stopped. Deck was no telepath. He was just a historian, a janitor of lost things, and his shift was about to begin. The heavy door to General Dutch's cell slid open with a hiss. The room inside was dark except for a single dim lamp on the ceiling. The walls were padded, and in the center he sat, General Dutch. He was a mountain. Even chained to the heavy chair, his presence filled the room. He was a Vorlag, a species that looked like a nightmare's version of a bull, 7 feet tall with a massive chest, thick gray skin, and 2 short broken horns on his brow. He wore simple gray prisoner's clothes. His head was bowed, a thick mane of black hair hiding his face. He was perfectly, unnervingly still. Dr. Deckard, holding his data slate, was guided to a small metal stool bolted to the floor. It was just outside the red circle painted on the ground, the kill zone. The insect guards took their positions by the door, their rifles aimed at the unmoving general. From a dark observation window high on the wall, Deckard could feel Administrator Moosberger watching him. Deckard sat. The silence in the room was heavier than gravity. He looked at the data slate in his hands. It was filled with the Council's official history. Chapter 1. The Vorlag Krieg Wars. War strategies, failures. Deckard looked at the massive, silent figure in the chair. He looked back at his slate, and he made a choice. He set the data slate down on the floor. He wasn't going to read it. Good. Good morning, General, Deckard said, his voice small in the large dead room. No response. The general didn't even twitch. My name is Dr. Eris Deckard. I have been assigned to create an archive of your people. The Vorlag, he paused, swallowing. The air was thick. The Council, he continued, gave me a list of your battles, your political history, but I have always found that history to be wrong. In the observation room, Deckard could see a flicker of motion. Moosberger was angry. Deckard ignored it. He was the historian. He would do this his way. A species is not its wars, General. A species is its stories, its songs. I read, in a forbidden archive, that the Vorlag did not have a written language for 10,000 years. You sang your history. He leaned forward just a little. They told me to start with the Krieg Wars, but that felt wrong. I would like, with your permission, to begin with the first song, the one your people sang to the twin moons. Dutch did not move. He was a statue of stone. A harsh, static buzz erupted from a speaker on the wall. Dr. Deckard! It was Moosberger's voice. Your task is to archive the useful data. We are not interested in old tales. Stick to the approved text. Deckard kept his eyes on the bowed head of the general. He spoke to the room. Administrator, a history without its songs is not a history. It is just a list of the dead. The archive must be complete. If I am to do this, I will do it. Right, the speaker buzzed, and then silence. Moosberger was furious, but he was also desperate. He had no other options. Deckard took a deep breath, and he began. He didn't read, he talked. He pulled from all the sentimental research he had spent his life collecting. He spoke of Vorlag art. He talked about their food, the 1,000-year-old recipes for core bread. He talked about their complex, beautiful 1,000 words for family. He spoke for hours. The guards at the door grew bored, and General Dutch remained silent. The session ended. Deckard's voice was hoarse. That is all for today, General. I will return tomorrow. We will speak of the great hunt of the crystal boars. He was escorted out. Moosberger was waiting for him. That was a waste of time, Doctor. You achieved nothing. The asset is still unresponsive. History is not a fast process, Administrator, Deckard said, his voice tired. It takes some time. I will continue tomorrow. He was right about one thing. He had achieved nothing. 3 days passed. The routine became a strange one-sided habit. Deckard would enter the cell. He would sit on his stool. The guards would watch. Musburger would monitor, and Deckard would talk. He talked about the Vorlag's ancient festivals. He described the rite of the blazing flower, a ceremony for young adults. He recited old poems he had memorized from a crashed freighter. The stars are the eyes of our grandfathers, he'd recite. They do not judge. They only remember. And General Dutch sat. He was the perfect audience. He was a black hole of silence, absorbing Deckard's words and giving nothing back. Musburger's reports to the council were harsh. The human historian is a failure. He sings nursery rhymes to the asset. No new data. I am recommending we end the project. And the prisoner. Deckard was given one more day. On the 4th day, Deckard entered the cell. He sat on the stool. He looked at the unmoving general. And he had run out of stories. He had told them all. Every poem, every ritual, every piece of art, the official archive, was complete. He was left with silence. Deckard sat there in that heavy, oppressive quiet for a long time. The guards shifted. Musburger from the observation room was about to order him to leave. The archive is complete, Deckard said, his voice a low whisper. All the facts, but none of the truth. He looked at the massive, broken alien. They told me you are mad, General. They told me your mind is an abyss. The telepaths who touched it. They broke. Deckard made a decision. A human decision. He reached down. And he turned off his official data slate. The small red recording light blinked off. In the observation room, Musburger stood up, alarmed. What is he doing, guards? He's breaking the rules! Before they could move, Deckard looked up at the general. His face was filled with a deep, tired understanding. I don't think you're mad, General, Deckard said, his voice now quiet, personal. No longer the historian, but just a man. I think you're full. He leaned forward. The Vorlag. Your species. They have no word for it. I checked. The idea doesn't exist in your language. He tapped his own chest. My species. We call it grief. We invented it. We perfected it for some of us. It's the only air we can breathe. Deckard broke all the rules. He began a new archive. His own. My archive, he said, his voice thick, is on a small colony called New Denver. It consists of 2 graves. Small ones. My wife, my daughter. He told the silent general about the day he lost them. Not to a war, not to a noble sacrifice, but to a simple, stupid, random, tiny, fast sickness. He described the helplessness. He described holding his daughter's hand as she grew cold. He described the silence that came after. The silence he still lived in. The other species, he gestured to the observation window. Musburger, they see this as a human weakness, a design flaw. They think logic is strength. They think processing a loss means deleting it. He shook his head, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. They don't understand, he whispered. For humans, surviving this, he tapped his heart again. Surviving the grief, that is our greatest strength. We don't delete it, we carry it. We build monuments to it. We tell stories about it, we sing their songs, so that they are never truly gone. Silence, and then a sound. It was not from Deckard. It was a low, deep scraping sound, like a mountain, grinding. In the observation room, Musburger and the guards went pale. The sound, it was coming from the general. Deckard slowly looked up, for the first time in 10 years. General Dutch's eyes were not staring at the blank wall, they were looking at Deckard, and his massive chained right hand was slowly, agonizingly, clenching into a fist, so tight that the metal of his chair began to groan. The cell was frozen. The only sound was the low, painful groan of metal as Dutch's fist tightened. The insect guards had their weapons raised, their mandibles clicking in fear. Musburger's voice, usually so cold, was now tight with panic. Deckard, status, what did you do? Report, the asset is active. Deckard never took his eyes off the general. The general's eyes, they were not mad. They were burning. They were like 2 swirling galaxies full of an ancient, unimaginable pain. Deckard's voice was a ragged whisper. I told him the truth, and then a new voice. It was not Deckard's. It was not Musburger's. It was a voice that sounded like rocks falling, like a tomb opening. It was deep, raw, and had not been used in a decade. What was her name? General Dutch had spoken. The entire ship went on high alert. Alarms, deep in the ship, began to chime. Deckard's heart hammered his ribs. He understood. This was not an interrogation. This was a trade. A story. For a story. His voice was thick. Her name was Sarah. Her name was Sarah. The general's massive head nodded just once. A crack had appeared in the stone. He took a ragged, shuddering breath. The first in 10 years. My madness. Dutch's voice scraped. It's got my Archivist, and then the general began to speak. And the truth was not what anyone was prepared for. The doomsday weapon. The soul killer virus. It was real. The council had that part right, but the council had it all wrong. It wasn't the enemy who had built it, it was his people. The Vorlag, in their desperation in the final dying days of the war, his high command, had created a last-ditch weapon, a genetic bomb that would not just kill, it would erase. It would wipe out all thinking life, turning them into nothing. The council had ordered Dutch, secure the weapon, but Dutch knew his people. He knew their pride. He knew their rage. He knew they would use it. They would rather see the galaxy burn than lose. I was the only one. Dutch grated. Who could stop it? He told Deckard of the final secret battle, the battle no one knew about, the battle inside his own fleet. He didn't lose the final battle to the enemy. He allowed it. He sacrificed his homeworld. He gave them order. He ordered his own loyal home fleet to hold the line, to die, holding back the rest of the Vorlag fleet, the ones carrying the soul killer bomb, while the enemy glassed his homeworld, glassed his planet, glassed his people. He murdered his entire species to save the galaxy. He was not a broken asset. He was a tomb. He was the living tomb of his entire race. The madness that the telepaths had touched, the abyss that had shattered their minds. It wasn't madness. It was grief. It was the combined, silent, screaming agony of all 8 billion Vorlag souls, which he, alone, had been holding inside him, in perfect, unmoving silence, and for 10 years. The telepaths weren't driven mad by a void. They were driven mad by too much. They had drowned Deckard. The Archivist of Sorrows was the only being in the galaxy who knew how to swim. In the observation room, Musburger was thrilled. He hadn't heard the grief. He hadn't heard the sacrifice. He hadn't heard the tragedy. He had heard one word: weapon. He's active. Musburger shrieked, his cold porcelain face finally cracking. The asset is talking! He knows the location. Secure the cell. Get the extraction team in there now. He slammed his hand on a red alert panel. Prepare for immediate deep memory extraction. Deckard knew what that was. A process that rips a mind apart to get the data inside. It would get the council their data, the weapon's exact location, everything, and it would destroy General Dutch. It would turn him, finally, into the broken equipment Musburger had always thought he was. It would erase the last living memory of the Vorlag people. No, Deckard whispered. Heavy, thudding footsteps pounded down the hallway. The extraction team. 6 huge soldiers in heavy black armor carrying glowing neural scythes. The cell door hissed open. Dr. Deckard. Musburger's voice boomed over the comm, triumphant. Step away from the asset. Your service is complete. You have done your job. The 6 massive armored soldiers stormed into the room. They fanned out, their glowing weapons raised. Deckard, the small, obsolete human, did not move. He stood up from his stool and he walked. He walked past the red kill zone line. He walked towards the massive, chained general. And he stood in front of him. He stood between the armored soldiers and the man on the chair. He was shielding him. No, Deckard said, his voice shaking but clear. One of the soldiers, a 7-foot-tall thing, hissed. Move, human, or be removed. No, Deckard said again, louder. He turned and he looked at the observation window. At Musburger, this is not an asset, Deckard shouted, his voice filled with a pure anger he never knew he had. This is a living archive. He pointed a shaking finger at the window. And under Galactic Historical Preservation Act, Article 4-7, a living archive of a dead species is protected by law. Musburger sputtered. That's an old law, he screamed. A cultural rule. This is a military need. It is the law, Deckard roared, planting his feet. The lead soldier had enough. It raised its glowing neural scythe to strike the human down. No, Deckard yelled, and before the weapon could fall, boom. A sound like a sonic boom cracked through the room. The chains holding General Dutch's arms exploded, not broke. Exploded into shrapnel that pinged off the walls. The 6 soldiers froze. General Dutch stood. He rose to his full height. He was not unmoving. He was not broken. He was focused. He was the general. He didn't move to attack. He didn't look at the guards. He simply placed one massive 3-fingered hand protectively on Dr. Archivist Deckard's shoulder. The power in the room had not just shifted, it had shattered. The cell was silent. The 6 armed soldiers were frozen. They were staring at a creature from their nightmares who had just snapped heavy steel like twigs. And that creature was protecting the small, frail human. General Dutch was a mountain. And Dr. Deckard was the only thing he was guarding. In that moment, Deckard was the only one with any real power. He was the archive. Deckard, his heart pounding, but his voice now calm, turned his head and looked at the observation window. He looked at Musburger. Administrator Musburger, Deckard said, his voice cutting through the silence. The weapon you're looking for isn't a thing. It's a terrible choice. He patted the massive hand that rested on his shoulder. And the madness, he continued, that you tried to cure, it was a warning. A shield that this man used to protect the galaxy from his own people. Musburger was silent. The truth crashed down on him. The story didn't end with a battle. It ended with a deal. General Dutch would give the Council the weapon's location, but Deckard would be his voice. On one condition. It was not to be secured. It was not to be studied. It was to be declared a galactic tomb, a place of grief, a sacred grave for the Vorlog species. It would be quarantined forever, under the joint protection of the Galactic Council. And the keeper of the archive, Dr. Archivist Deckard. The final scene is months later. The prison ship is no longer a prison, it is a sanctuary. The Ethelberg Protocol, or as the galaxy now called it, the Empathy Protocol, had become the new standard for first contact and trauma recovery. The cold logic of Musburger was seen as outdated. Alien species from all over the galaxy now came, not to be fixed by logic, but to be heard by historians, by poets, by archivists, by humans. The last image is in the cell, cell 734. The door is open. The chains are gone. The padded walls have been replaced with bookshelves. General Dutch and Dr. Deckard sit across from each other. Between them is not a data slate, but a simple, bound, paper book. And together, they are writing. They are creating a new archive. A book of remembrance. General Dutch is finally telling Deckard the names of his people, one by one, all 8 billion of them, and Deckard is telling Dutch stories about Sarah. The human weakness of grief had become the galaxy's new, unbreakable strength. And that's where our story ends for today. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey. If you enjoyed the story and felt that spark of humanity, please help it travel further by hitting the like button, sharing it with someone who loves a good story, and subscribing to the channel. Your support is what allows us to keep exploring these universes. If you're new, be sure to check out the other stories in our channel playlists. We have many more worlds to discover together. What did you think of Dr. Deckard's Empathy Protocol? What was your favorite part of the story? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I read as many as I can, and your suggestions for future stories are always welcome. From my corner of the world to yours, I want to wish you all the best. Be kind to one another, and we'll see you in the next story.